listeners, to Kyle and Cody's Cult Cinema Cast. I'm Kyle.
I'm Cody.
Yeah, and Merry Black Christmas to everyone, because we're watching the Good Black Christmas movie. This is a movie that has 2 remakes. Let that sink in. 2 remakes, no sequels, which is just a brilliant sign for those remakes. I didn't look up the 2019 one, so I don't know how that turned out. I'll just look up what it scored real quick, but I did look up the 2006 one, which I saw enough of that to realize it was terrible. Yeah, the 2019 one is looking pretty bad too, based on the reviews. But yeah, it's a pretty This is, if this had been released, this is an interesting, weird little movie. Black Christmas was released in 1974, from Canadian film stuff. What's the production studio? I should. That's should have been the end of that sentence, but I didn't have it in my head, so I tried to improvise something, and it did not work. It's produced. Yeah, it's a classic Canadian horror film. Uh, Perhaps the best Canadian horror film. Um, I'm not thinking of who's better right now. It's produced by essentially actually just Canadian Film Development Corporation, which is a bit of a crown corporation, state-owned corporation for those of you who don't use the term crown corporation. But essentially they put in money toward filmmakers so that Canada can produce films that can perhaps be culturally relevant. Though it is distributed by Warner Brothers in the states, but distributed by Ambassador Films in Canada, or was anyway. Yeah, it's classic Canadian film, made by, directed by Bob Clark, written by Roy Moore, produced by Bob Clark. So it's a pretty, it's a pretty independent film, but and it sets stuff apart from other slashers, despite perhaps being one of the best slasher movies ever made. Despite the fact that I think either Clark or Roy Moore don't consider it a slasher movie, but it fits the criteria. But it's very, very good.
Okay, maybe we should talk about that. What do you classify as a slasher film?
Okay, so my friend my friend Brett, who's a bit more of an expert than me, it's sort of like a short term. I'll look up the dictionary definition while I'm at this. Slasher film is typically codified by like a motion picture about a serial killer, or sometimes serial killers, and about it's putting their murders on display, and that's the feature of the film. And I'm not doing that great. Yeah, and traditionally it'll have a bit of a mystery element where like the people aren't sure who the killer is, or there's some sort of twist. So it's kind of like a mystery. It's sort of mystery meets horror, although that mystery part of it's kind of faded over time. But originally it's kind of like a mixing of that. Elements of like psychological horror. There's a lot of gruesome kills in a lot of these. Although this is somewhat, actually, I don't want to say it's tame, because it does get pretty brutal, but it's not like doesn't revel in it as some ways. Like, if it doesn't revel in it in a way, this film doesn't revel in its kills the way some slasher movies do. But then again, it also does very much do that. It's just it's not in the same way. It just feels like they do have one person who's killed in this who we don't see the body of, and I don't feel like like an 80s slasher film would deny us that.
Yeah, so like I was reading up here on the Wikipedia page. Basically, I don't know why they keep on trying to retitle this. Black Christmas seems like a very decent.
Oh yeah, that was a weird
Uh,
thing, right? Because this was like, yeah. So yeah, they released this in the States as like Silent Night, Evil Night for some goddamn reason, which is like
mhm.
that's such a worse title. Also, there's already Silent Night. I mean, I think this was before Silent Night, Deadly Night was a thing, but I don't get why they changed that. Um, some weird with Warner Brothers, I guess. They just figured to change it. But yeah, no, this is so that's if you were around back in the day, you might know this as Silent Night, Evil Night. Our American listeners, but yeah, it's just a weird thing they did. This thing had like a bunch of weird things with like its release. It's probably why it didn't become like super huge. Um, it never ended up getting a release on like it never got like a big television release like a lot of movies used to do back in the day. They went to go release this, and the date it was like this was going to get its television premiere like 2 weeks after the Ted Bundy killings of all fucking things. So they
Mhm.
ended up like not doing this and showing some other movie. Um, ooh, the what's the guy's name? I remember who it is. The Man of Bronze. Who am I thinking of? Doc Savage. I think Man of Bronze. They showed the Doc Savage movie instead that week, but they were gonna yeah that's so this never
Yeah,
got
I've
a
got
television
nothing. I don't
release in
know
the
what this is.
States. Yeah, he's like a pulp character from like way back in the day. It's not really important, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of faded into obscurity now. But he's sort of known in some circles as like the proto Superman. I don't think that's too much. It's interesting. But anyway, yeah, Black Christmas this week. Yeah, the
Oh, we could
classic
have done
Canadian horror
Batman
film.
Returns for this.
What's that?
We could have done Batman Returns for this.
Because it's a Christmas movie? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Christmas movie. Like,
Wait, is Batman Returns a Christmas? Yeah, yeah, it is. Do both those films take place near Christmas?
Batman
Because doesn't the
faces off
first one
against
too?
both Penguin and Catwoman during the Christmas period in Gotham City. So yes.
Doesn't the first one also do Christmas stuff?
I'm not too sure. And apparently also Donnie Brasco.
Donnie Brasco. I'm blanking on who that is.
Yeah, the name sounds or Iron Man 3. We could have done Iron Man 3.
Yeah. What did you? Would you rather watch Iron Man 3 than this?
Uh I like Iron Man. I can't remember which one. No, Iron Man 3 gets into like that weird Mandarin story arc, which I don't think really worked out.
The stuff in Shang Chi was pretty good when they brought it up. I kind of like how they dealt with that in the end, but I don't know. But yeah, no, it didn't work out in that movie certainly. But we got
That
some
is
meat out
such
of
a
it, if
weird
nothing else.
it, that's such a weird like okay, so how do you define a Christmas movie? Let's talk about that because like
Um,
I'm looking at some of these uh lists in the Wikipedia page on Christmas movies, and according to this, Rambo First Blood is a Christmas movie because when Rambo is in the police station at the beginning of the movie, it still has Christmas decorations up.
I don't even think that movie takes place during Christmas. I think it's too
The-
like it might still have Christmas decorations up, but I don't think it takes place during like December. I don't know where this. I don't remember where Rambo takes the First Blood takes place, but like it's not snowy. I don't think. I don't remember. It's been a while since I watched First Blood. That's a damn good movie, by the way. That's but I digress. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, like I think a Christmas movie to some extent has to like deal with like I don't even think not so much central to the holiday because I've maintained that like Last Christmas by Wham isn't a Christmas song because Christmas is like really incidental to the like plot of the song. And by that logic, kind of this doesn't really count by as a Christmas movie despite the name. Like I don't know. Yeah, I guess Black Christmas isn't really a Christmas movie because it's just using Christmas as like that's the interesting thing. It uses Christmas as a bit of a effective plot device actually. I'll talk about this a bit more later, I think, but yeah, I don't. I think it has to like deal with like the themes of Christmas and have something at least about like family or togetherness or coming together or uh or the more religious aspects obviously, but yeah, no, it's yeah, I think that would require that. Like I think why Die Hard works as a Christmas movie is because it's about him getting back to his loved ones. But this is just something where it takes place around Christmas, and it's good for the setting. It makes it look. I think it does like a good does wonders for the setting, the time of year. But I don't know. Yeah, where were we going with this? You were asking what counts as a Christmas movie, and
Okay,
I guess I don't know.
okay, because
Yeah.
the reason why I brought this up is because, like, besides the fact that it was like remotely shot around like, oh, there's a Christmas party at a sorority house. This is technically a Christmas movie. Isn't really what I would overly qualify as like a Christmas movie. And like, ever since people have been pointing out the fact that, like, yeah, Die Hard is clearly um a Christmas movie, I just don't feel that like that definitively we should say that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. But you bring up the fact that he's trying to get back to his family. um like, that's just like, to me, that's not really a good qualifier for what we would classify as a Christmas movie.
I guess, but I do think it. I think it's certainly more of a qualifier than this has, sort of. Even though I did like choose to have this at Christmas because it's. I mean, actually, this is one of the weird things. There's no. I think that's why horror and Christmas don't really mix, is because like horror's like anti Christmas themes, where it's like I think you can do it. It's just not what people would. It's just not something that would really settle with horror very well because it like really fights against the themes. I think you could pull off something like aliens being it could maybe work because you're trying to save people, but I don't think anything this so much because it's just tragic, really. Although this is probably the best Christmas horror movie by far, almost certainly.
There's a couple of according to this list, both Rocky 4 and 5 are yeah, 4 and 5 are both Christmas movies. I guess the 15-round fight in Rocky 4, which we did on the podcast, is set on Christmas Day in the Soviet Union.
I forgot about that, I guess, but yeah, I think yeah, I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't think that like you can just throw something around Christmas and have it be a Christmas movie. But I think it's sometimes works if the theme kind of like sort of like can be if you squint hard enough. But
Okay, so if we should have done anything, we should have done the 1959 film Santa Claus.
is like Santa Claus with
It's
a
a
W?
Mexican fantasy. No, it's a 1959 Mexican fantasy film directed by Rene Cardendono, um, where Santa Claus has to fight Satan.
We could do that next year. That might be fun.
What? I didn't even know this was a thing that I needed in
Yeah,
my life, but
I mean, write it
apparently.
down. Yeah, write it down. I want to do like a staff meeting about what we're going to do for season 4 next year, early in January. So write it down somewhere. Keep it in mind.
And it was featured on Mystery Science Theater.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. A conversation we were hold on, this is just in case it didn't just to put it in, just in case we lost a little bit of footage. This is Kyle and Cody's called CinemaCast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Cody.
Yeah, yeah. I might cut that out, but yeah, 12 minutes in. But we were also talking about yeah. This week we're talking about the 1974 film Black Christmas, perhaps Canada's greatest horror film. One of the progenitors to the slasher genre. Not like it's beginning of like one of the classical slasher films. Um, we were talking a little bit in the footage we lost about what constitute a slasher film, which is interesting because like this notably I think it's either the director or the writer who doesn't feel this is a slasher film, although it does fit all the boxes of a slasher film technically, even if it's maybe, I mean, he's also like really early on in the genre's history, so it makes sense that he may not enjoy like the comparison, especially comparing it to some of the 80s slashers. Like this is operating on a very different wavelength than like the Nightmare on Elm Street or like the latter Friday the 13th. This is operating under the like earlier definition of slasher films, because if you talk to like about a bunch of horror aficionados, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, like Nightmare on Elm Street or Child's Play isn't really a slasher movie; it's a monster movie." This is a thing that's been said
Mhm.
to me, but because though the slasher was originated as something of like a horror mystery, where like you were put in the midst of like an active serial killer situation, and it was uh, from the point of view of the victims and trying to figure out who the killer is and by extension defeat him. But obviously that's not something that would apply to like Nightmare on Elm Street, because we know who's killing the children. Even I didn't watch the whole thing, but the one of the two this movie has two remakes. One of the two remakes, the 2006 one, is just like a more modern slasher film where like the serial killer is just out there and is like everyone knows who he is, despite the fact that doesn't work. It's a very bad movie. I've seen enough of it to know it's a bad movie. You can tell. And frankly, if this movie had been made into the 80s, they would have just ruined it. Like if you made this movie in 84, it would have been if this was a 1984 American horror film, this would have been terrible. Like you would have had no, like maybe one good actor. You would have had like 6 topless scenes. The characters would have been way stupider. But this is like so early in like the life cycle of the slasher film that like the tropes aren't really in place. So it's like this is a film like when I describe the plot of the film, you'll know what I'm talking about if I said when I say it if it was made later it would be ruined, because it's a film that it's a horror film, a slasher film that takes place in a sorority and uses graphic violence. This would have been way worse in the 80s. Like although it would have gotten 12 sequels either way, let's be honest. But yeah, yeah, this is born at what this is like at the beginning of what's considered the like classical. This is the very beginning of what's called the slasher era of films. This is released the same year as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and is really kind of one of the things that kind of kicks off the slasher genre in its own way.
So the reason why I brought that up a definitive definition on what we would classify as uh, a slasher film is a lot of the later works, such as Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, that other one, Friday the 13th. They all have like supernatural elements based around the idea. Like this doesn't have any. It's just one guy, and he's like, "I'm just gonna go murder a whole bunch of people in a sorority." So,
which is arguably
which
scarier because this is like, oh, this is just how real people die throughout the whole movie, and that's like very effective. Like, it's not some flight of fancy. It's like, oh, people die like this all the time. It's like
Mhm.
it works in its favor, I think. Go on, though.
So what I'm saying is, would we still like arguably it'd still be like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and all of them other movies would still be
Shit.
classified
Sorry,
as
1 second. My work's calling.
uh
You
this
were
is like
talking.
the third interrupt we've had. Um
Um, you were talking, I think.
I was gonna
My
I was
fucking
bringing up the fact that like arguably we're in the uh golden age of horror films. As you said,
like
as you said
with this
earlier,
movie.
Texas Chain. Yeah, I would argue that like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, like those are the like and Halloween are and those are like the three biggest that like we could
Yeah, generally how it's tracked is like the golden age of
everything after the first.
yeah, I guess essentially they track it as like the golden age of the slasher is like the very early 90s to like the mid ends in the like early 90s and begins in like the mid to late 70s, and it's either tracked to 1974 with this and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or with the release of Halloween 4 years later in 1978, which was influenced largely by this film, among other things, notably the first person killer point of view. I did find a better definition. Sorry, we had paused, and I did find a better definition of slasher film movie, which I kind of liked. Is it's a horror movie built around the stalking and killing scenes, essentially. I think that works pretty
Mhm.
well because it's generally like a serial killer or some supernatural threat, and it's about them hunt and or about the supernatural threat hunting down the killer. And I think that's a pretty generous definition that includes everything. And yeah, it was this is like almost a precursor, which is about probably why it's so good. It doesn't have like it certainly doesn't have the people breathing down the necks of the later films where they're some of the later slasher films where they get really bad. And I do think this is kind of this certainly does this has a low budget considering the budget's $620,000, and it only gets to like a $4 million box office, which is good. It's just not like legendarily good. It is an 8 times return on investment though. It like I really just appreciate how this doesn't have a lot of the stuff that's bad in like later horror and like later slasher films, whereas this uses uh like you can't imagine this same like I cannot imagine this, like I've said it a million times, I can't imagine this film being made in a different year, especially not in the American horror scene where it's done like this. Like it's not like terribly exploitative. The horror is good. We relate to the victims. They aren't just there to be murdered. Like we feel it's bad when the characters die, and that they're trying to get saved, and that we kind of want more people to get to the end, which is a bit antithetical to what some slasher fans want. But I find it's really good. I do think this is way better than Halloween, actually, because I did watch Halloween a little while ago because I knew I was going to be watching this, which is like, this is a big thing in the conversations about this movie. Is like, oh, this helped inspire Halloween. This helped inspire Halloween. This helped inspire Halloween. And I was like, okay, I better watch Halloween. So, and I watched it, and like, this is just so much better than Halloween, in my opinion.
Mhm.
What do you think? Have you seen Halloween?
I don't actually really watch a whole lot of horror films, so no. I think I tried to watch the
I
remake
don't
in
watch
like
a ton of them either all the
2012,
time,
but
but I do occasionally get into one. But no, the yeah, it's like, my problems with Halloween is it's really, I think, like, I just don't care for some of the parts of it. It's one of those, something I've come kind of aware of lately is like, it's really, it does participate in this kind of gross othering of like of the mentally ill Michael Myers, and it goes into that trope, which I don't really care for. That's not like yeah, what am I trying to say here? Like, it's very much the guy Loomis goes in, and I just think he's a really terrible psychiatrist, because he's just like, Michael Myers is pure evil and must be destroyed, uh now that he's escaped. And it's like, you're not a very good psychologist, are you? That's kind of like giving up on your patient there, bud. Which, yeah, I don't but yeah, yeah, this was, I don't know, what else do we say? It's just, without like going too far into the plot. Uh yeah, it's gotten two remakes. I think I've talked about this, but they seem bad. The 2006 one especially, I just watched it. I got like I watched like a review and got like clips of it, and it was like, oh, this is exactly what any idiot would make this movie if they had gotten their hands on it. But thankfully, this movie was in good hands of people who wouldn't make it into something terrible. Because, like, geez, this is such like a any other like horror movie starring a sorority is just like an excuse to like see like do a bunch of eye candy shots before they're murdered graphically. Which I look, sometimes that's fine, but um it's not high art, which I'd say kind of this is. Um and this also has really good actors, like Margot Kidder's in it. She goes on to play Lois Lane in the Superman movies. Uh, she plays Barb in it.
yeah.
Yep. John's wait, is it John Saxon? Dulea? Kier Dulea. Yeah, Kier Dulea. He plays he's the guy that played Dave Bowman in the 2001 and 2010 movies.
Okay.
Yeah, who's a fairly, like, he's the guy that plays Peter in this. He's also in a few other films. Olivia Hughes, Husey,
Mhm.
she plays Jess in this, and she's known for a couple films. She was in like a big adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, and yeah, this is one of her other big films. There's John Saxon playing the lead detective. He ends up in Nightmare on Elm Street, actually. Oddly enough.
Well, Husey also ends up in It, the miniseries,
Oh,
which notoriously has Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown. I don't know if that's necessarily like does he did they take It the movie and just cut it down into like something that they can show on television as a miniseries, or did he play
No, the original It with Tim Curry is a miniseries. It's not a movie.
Oh, so they
I don't think
probably
I.
just took
Yeah,
the miniseries and repackaged it up as a movie at that point in time. Then is what you're saying?
yeah. I think it's like I
Because
don't think
I've
it. I
seen
think it's maybe like
everything.
a. I don't know. I think it's only like a couple nights or something. Hold on, we'll look this up. Because we can find this out. It miniseries. I don't know. Like it might be just a 2 night thing. To be fair, I don't know if it's a. In which case, it would just be like 4 hours long or something. Miniseries. I'll just find out here. Like it's been released as a like as one. Yeah, it's a 2-part miniseries. So it's gonna clock in as something long, but ultimately watchable. I think running time is 192 minutes on like the longest versions. 198, 187 minutes. So that's a little over 3 hours.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's long, but ultimately something you can watch in like a sitting if you're dedicated, or like a day. Yeah. So that was yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Like I thought. That's what I thought it was. I just didn't know for sure. But yeah, this has like really quality actors in it. Even like at least people that turn out to be talented, if nothing else. It's also yeah, like I said, one of the big things is it pioneered this technique of like first person shooting. I think the image from really early in the movie where the serial killer has to climb up the side of the house is like something that was like the cinematographer or the I don't know what's his position. Shit. No, no, don't go to the Warner Brothers Wikipedia page. Albert J. Dunk is the guy's name. But yeah, he's the cinematographer or like the cameraman. He kind of like cooks it up. Well, I'm dedicated to finding this now. Oh yeah, yeah, it's the camera. He's the camera operator, Burt Dunk, and he designed the rig that allowed them to do that. And it's kind of just like strapped to his head. So for a minute, he does kind of play the serial killer. Um, the serial killer Billy is his nickname in this. We don't get his real name. That's a spoiler. Although, whatever. Yeah, there's technically 3 guys that play Billy. All 3 are kind of uncredited. The Nick Mancuso and also director Bob Clark kind of like team together to play the phone voice, the his Billy's voice, and also Bob Clark does some shots. It like uses himself to form the shadow. Oh yeah, I guess Nick is like the actor who plays Billy too. So that's in the few scenes where we do see him. What time? How long have we been on this? I think we should get into the movie. It's been 40 minutes. Yeah, let's get into this. Unless you have something really important to go in before we get into the plot. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. This movie's really good, actually. Our film opens to the sorority house um, in the snow. They're playing Silent Night, Holy Night. Perhaps why they changed the title to Silent Night, Evil Night in the United States briefly. Uh, Not a good justification because Black Christmas is probably a good title. Uh, um, it was briefly going to be auction. They were considering they were filming it initially under the the name Get Out. No, not Get Out. Get Out something else. Stop Me. It was originally he originally wrote the script under the title Stop Me, but given the fact that the film takes place around Christmas and given the setting, they decided to change the name during filming to the official title, which I think is for the better because it kind of works that way, and it kind of works because this is like a tragedy, like a tragic story that takes place around Christmas, and if like you might like see this if this story was being like like the real, if this real life murder was like being talked about in real life, someone might call it Black Christmas. That seems like a very newspapery title for this event. We get a little bit of a glimpse of the house, and we get to see our first person shot, where the killer walks up to the house and then peers through a window a little bit before climbing up the side of the building on what would you call that thing? I was wondering this. I couldn't think of the name for it. The little wooden lattice that like vines grow up times. But he climbs up the side of the building on this wooden lattice and climbs into the attic of the sorority house, and that's how he
Wouldn't
gets
that
into the
just be
house.
called the lattice?
It might just be called a lattice.
Okay.
Yeah, it might just be called that. I just thought there was another fancy word for it because it was the thing. The reason I have this in my head is because it was like it was a word in like an English assignment once, so I know that I know it on some level, but I can't remember for sure. But yeah, it might just be called a lattice. Yeah, it's also neat because it's in a bit, the camera's like a bit fisheyed during these scenes, if you notice. But I just thought they were, and it kind of like adds to the freakiness of the shot. Inside the sorority, distracting the people inside, there's a bit of a tiny Christmas party going on. There's a couple boys over. It's actually a really tame party. I'm just constantly reminded about how this, if this had been made in the 80s, it just would have been like the sleaziest thing ever. And this is just like, oh, this is just like a normal place where women are going to school. We see, what's her name again? We see Margot Kidder's character, Barb, talking on the phone. At first, I thought she was going to be the Void character, but I think that's just a bit of misdirection, which is a thing horror movies do, and I kind of approve of. And she's kind of walking around with a drink in her hand. She's a bit of a she drinks a bit through the movie, and she's walking around when she gets a phone call from I think her parents to talk about going skiing and asking if she's had a drink and whatnot. It's pretty innocuous. In the meantime, the killer is like climbed down from the attic through a trap door and is like walking around, and he's watching the Barb on the phone from the upper staircase, something he does a lot. And then Margot and yeah, Barb, I sorry, Margot's character Barb puts down the phone, and there's another phone call at which she answers, and she points out that it's this crank caller again, and it's this guy who's been calling a few times before this about, and like moaning on the phone and making like lewd harassment and like obscene phone calls. um they're quite disturbing at this point anyway. I don't know if there's maybe a bit of escalation here, but this one's quite disturbing, and a lot of the girls end up listening to it far longer than I think anyone would. Like, you'd probably hang up on this in real life, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is also 1974, so there's no caller ID or anything. We don't have a lot of
Prank calling was definitely a thing back then.
oh yeah, it was way easier back in the day. There's a reason Bart Simpson got away with
I
it.
don't want to argue semantics too much about this here. If you call your own number back in these days, can you call yourself from within the house? Like this is a point of major contention within the film, because like it's one of the
Yeah.
one of
Hold
the
on.
biggest tropes that
Yeah.
stemmed from it, right?
Yeah, because he's talking about later in the film. It's revealed that because obviously the killer's inside the house right now, so he's calling them from inside the house. I'm gonna Google. Can you call your own? Can you not? Can you call your own landline.
Well, now you probably can. You just get your own answering machine, right? But
Yeah,
this
but
was
there's also 2 phones in the house, to be fair. I don't actually I don't think you actually can, cuz or maybe hmm maybe you can, maybe it depends on how your phone's set up. But there's also the other explanation. There's also the other possibility that the 2 phones in the house are on separate lines, maybe, because this is a sorority. To be fair, it may be seen as a like convenience that you can make multiple phone calls from inside the house, because otherwise there's only one person can make a phone call in the house. So maybe there are 2 like separate phone lines, and maybe this building has 2 phone numbers.
okay. It just seems like a reach, and like
Yeah,
one of the
true.
most like critically acclaimed oh, the phone's coming from inside the house like thing was just kind of like all made up and complete bullshit. So
Yeah, I think it could come from like people in the 70s not really know how landlines work. Um, but I know like if you get like later like late I know like earlier like you'd have things where like every like several people would be on the same phone line, so maybe mm, I don't know. Maybe we should just Google phone call inside the house. This is, by the way, is also a like based off like an old urban legend of like a babysitter calling like getting phone calls, like essentially this situation, but it's like a babysitter from the 50s, and was call like it's an urban legend that she called, and it turned out the person was calling from inside the house. It's just it's a bit of an urban legend to begin with. Like the original thing is actually based on like this. The commonly cited source of the urban legend is this murder of this lady called, or this young girl called Janet Christman, who died in like 1950. But it wasn't so much. It didn't involve like a call from inside the house as far as the real life thing went. Like I like it's not like this ever actually happened in real life, so that's part of it. Yeah, okay, essentially yeah, no, essentially you can't. Most people can't. So there'd have to be like a second phone line, which is possible in this situation because it is a sorority and more than one people would need to be making the phone call. So the guy could just be calling from this upstairs phone we don't see. Also, I think there's also maybe some maybe the killer has like messed with the phone line a little bit, but we don't see any evidence of that. This is obviously a very old trope, based on like from a long time ago. But yeah. Anyway. But yeah, they listen to this phone call for like a long time when they call, and the guy's just like making lewd gesture, like lewd remarks, and like screaming and like shouting and making dumb jokes about how he's gonna like do lewd, gross things to the girls inside the sorority. Because this would be a sorority phone number, so that's to some extent you could find in a phone book probably. But yeah, there's a bunch of snorting, licking sounds, all that gross stuff. They eventually do hang up though. The one after this, the one girl who's weirdly enough, this is kind of like a sign of how this doesn't fall by the tropes. The first girl that that gets killed in this is like the chaste Christian girl who's very nice and like is being like made fun of for not being like very out there and not being much of a partier.
mhm.
So that's kind of like if you did this in 2020, you'd be called subverting the trope. But here it is before the trope was a thing, getting done the opposite of what it normally would. because famously the final girl is in a lot of slasher movies is like, oh, she's the virginal one that's smarter and whatnot. But this one time, the virginal girl who's debatably smarter is the one who's killed first, which is interesting. But yeah, she goes upstairs because she needs to pack. Her dad's coming to pick her up the next day. We get to see the sorority house's big fluffy white cat named Claude, who I love. Claude is great. Claude is a nice big fluffy good kitty.
Wasn't he trying to eat the face of one of the dead bodies later?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, later on a little bit, he's more looking at it. More, it's even
That's my thing. Cats will definitely eat your face.
yeah.
So just a warning for all those cat people out there who are like, I want cats. If you ever die in the presence of a cat, you won't stop, or you stop feeding them, they will definitely eat you.
Yeah, I mean, they have to eat somehow. I'll forgive them. Anyway,
That's awful.
yeah. Uh, so yeah. Meanwhile, she's packing and she thinks she sees something in her closet, and it's the killer, and he jumps out after a while and strangles her. And she is the first death of the movie. Actually, is she?
Mhm.
She might technically be the second, but the first one happens because we'll get to this. But there might be someone who's died earlier than this. Yeah, yeah. I think she is technically the second person Billy has killed. The killer Billy, who is what he says his name is over the phone. At some point, if not in this phone call, then later. There is another body from earlier before this, I think. And given how he was walking around, it seems like maybe he killed that first person on the way here. I think that checks out. But yeah, so this character, what is her name? Claire. Claire is her name. The girl Claire has strangled, and she's actually left in this like her body is eventually taken upstairs. Although this isn't communicated properly, I don't think. Like you don't see the body moved from this room, so it kind of just for a while. If you don't catch it, it kind of seems like they're just ignoring searching this room for the body for a while, which is interesting. But no, she's dragged up to the attic where Billy puts her in a rocking chair. She's actually in this. Her head's wrapped in the plastic bag for the rest of the movie, and that's actually they don't use like a prop for this. The actress just holds her breath for a while during these scenes where we see her. It's pretty convincing, actually. It's pretty disturbing. She does a good job of that. Um, yeah, good job, Lynn Griffin. Good job, Lynn Griffin. You did decent. In the meantime, the sorority den mother, is that the term for what she is? Mrs. Mack or Miss Mack?
I think that would be an accurate description of like she
Yeah,
comes in and she does like house cleaning,
yeah. I think
uh,
she owns the house, maybe.
stuff like that. Yeah, I really don't have
Yeah, I don't know.
an answer to
What
this.
is does the plot synopsis? I wonder if it says. I'm just seeing if it says what she is anywhere in here. Mrs. McHenry. Yeah, Mrs. McHenry. She's referred to as a house mother. Yeah, she's essentially it's a name for
A
someone who's
housemaster is a schoolmaster in charge of boarding house.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty
She's in
much.
charge of it. I guess maybe she doesn't own it, but I don't know how sororities work either. But yeah, she arrives back home. She's carrying some stuff into the sorority house, where most of the girls present her with a new shirt, blouse, as like a Christmas present because they appreciate it. Mrs. Mack is a pretty good den mother, I think. Like she seems like a pretty cool. She seems cool.
Yeah, when I first saw her, I thought she was Kathy Bates, but she wasn't. I thought she was a young Kathy Bates, but it's somebody just unheard of. Marion Waldman. doesn't even have a Wikipedia page about her.
Yeah, Marion Waldman doesn't have a Wikipedia page at all. Yeah, I think she's cool as a den mutter. She seems like she'd be one of the better ones. She wouldn't be on your ass about stuff. And she kind of admits to that later in the movie. She's kind of nice. Yeah, too bad what happens to her. Really. But we get a few clues as to who Billy is. Like we see his skin, so we know he's a white guy. We see him wearing jeans. Just like we don't see a lot of him. So that's interesting. Jess gets one of the characters, Jess, played by Olivia Hussey, gets a phone call from her boyfriend, who's a music student who's practicing pretty heavily to become a concert pianist.
Oh, okay. So sorry. The person who played uh Phyllis in the first Black Christmas went on to play Miss Mac in the 2006 remake of Black Christmas.
Oh yeah, okay, that's interesting actually. Yeah,
So
I can see it.
that's kind of a neat follow
Yeah,
through there. I wonder if there's more like that.
I've seen that actress. I've seen enough of that movie. That makes sense. I can see it actually. Mrs. Mac also goes around like hiding bottles of sherry everywhere. Like she has a book with like a cutout for like a Mickey of sherry. She fishes one out of a toilet bowl later, which is pretty gross. It's pretty interesting. Um, though she's cool, I'm not gonna give her too much shit. But yeah, Jess, played by Olivia Hussey, I don't know. She gets a call from her boyfriend Peter, or she calls him and says that because he wasn't able to make it to the party that night because he's practicing for his big music recital, and he's been like practicing for 3 days. It's pretty psychotic, actually. Though classical music people can be pretty psychotic. That's known quantity pretty well. So yeah, he says she just Jess says that she wants to talk to Peter, and he says, "Oh yeah, I guess we can talk at like 2 o'clock tomorrow." And yeah, she agrees to that and then hangs up because they haven't seen each other in a few days. It's probably good that they meet. And yeah, she's gonna go do that. Jess goes to go check on Claire, but doesn't get an answer and just kind of figures that she's asleep. But in fact, she is very graphically dead as um, Billy rocks her rocking chair she's in back and forth and sings a nursery rhyme. Yeah. The next day, this guy we cut to this guy who bumps into this other guy and loses his glasses, and he ends up asking about hey, my daughter Claire was supposed to meet me here so I could pick her up. I haven't seen her. Do you know where I can find her building? And yeah, he gets pointed out there. We gradually figure out that no one's seen her in a while, as he arrives at the sorority and goes to ask around. Mrs. Mack can't help him too much. He's kind of also pretty disapproving of the decor of the sorority house, notably like a few posters of like shirtless men. There's one where it's just like a peace sign made up of two people and missionary, which is Miss Mac tries to cover up with her hand. It's kind of funny, and he's pretty disapproving. But they go to go walk her up, and she also tries chasing after Claude because she hears him, but doesn't find him. So she ends up leaving, and we see Claire from the window, which I assume she isn't actually at the window. This is just symbolic, and like I'm just assuming this movie can't actually be solved by someone looking up at the wrong time. I'm just gonna assume that's the case, hopefully, or that the angles of that don't really work out. That someone would be able to see that from the outside. Maybe I don't know what how this works exactly. I don't know the setup of this whole place. Jess goes to meet up with Peter. who she informs uh, who he who she informs that she is pregnant and that she wants to get an abortion. And Peter is not happy about that. He's quite upset about it, and yeah, they end up walking out of there on sort of bad terms. Still, it's getting to kind of late in the day, and no one's still found Claire. They get another call about they get another prank call at this point. We're getting some red herringness about Peter because he's really upset about Jess. Although obviously not all of this makes sense. Although there's some things that work out. Like he hasn't been seen by her in through for by her boyfriend in a couple days, so like he's kind of unaccounted for, and he's just kind of been like locked in a room for a while doing piano, so it's possibly could have snuck out or something. But yeah, sorry, I oh yeah, at this point Claire and them the not Claire and them, some of the people from the sorority, including Mr. Henderson, Claire's dad. I didn't know if I said his name properly. They go to the police station to lodge some complaints, but the officer doesn't take them very seriously. Says, "Oh well, she might have just run off for a little while with some boy." Also, which is quite upsetting to her boyfriend, because if she was running off with some boy, it better be him, and she hasn't been running off with him, so yeah, he's pretty pissed off at that implication when he finds out about it. But that's a little bit of a later scene. We see a bit of Peter's piano recital, which goes very poorly. Although I imagine having three grumpy-looking white men stare at you while they decide your future is all going to be rough on people at the best of times. Uh, I don't like just three like just empty room, you a piano, and just three grumpy ass looking white dudes just like staring you down is like that's nerve poison basically. We also find out about this 13-year-old girl that's been missing, and this is something we hear in the background as Chris, Claire's boyfriend, runs into like stomps into the police station and gives the cops shit for not taking this seriously because no one's heard anything, and he gives them ends up doing a whole thing. Meanwhile, back at the sorority, Mr. H is having supper with the girls and some of the girls, and Mr. H can't really eat because he's nervous about all this, and like no one's seen her daughter. No one's seen his daughter, so it's pretty rough looking. Barb's having a bit of a nervous breakdown because she was teasing Claire before she went missing, and she thinks that people are blaming that on her. But yeah, they end up sending her to bed pretty well after this. We cut back to a scene where Peter wrecks his piano because he's failed his recital. And then we cut back to sorority where Chris finally meets Mr. Harrison and they talk a little bit. The next day, Mrs. Mack is going to go leave and has a taxi waiting on her and she's going to leave as some of the girls, Chris and Mr. H, are going to go talk to the police a bit more. Because she's officially been gone 24 hours and no one's seen her, which is a pretty bad sign. So she's in the house alone, and she's, or pretty well alone. I think Barb's sleeping, or like home alone or something. But she's getting ready to leave. She has a taxi waiting outside, but she ends up trying to find out where Claude is so she can say goodbye, which eventually leads her to the attic and Claire's dead body and a hook to the face that Billy wheels at her like a wrecking
Yeah,
ball.
why there okay, so here I was just reading the plot summary trying get my grounding on where the fuck we are in this movie. But
Yeah.
the way they describe this is it's a crane hook.
Yeah. Why would it
Okay,
be in the
but why
attic,
do they
you're
have a
asking?
crane hook in their fucking attic?
Um,
Yes.
I mean, there's reasons. This is a college campus. It might be being used for like something. Oh, hold on. It's situated. Given where it's situated, the crane hook might be situated above the trap door, and it might be used. It might be a way of like lifting stuff into the attic because it is. It is. It does go straight up.
Sure.
Yeah, so that might be why it's there. I think.
Okay. I'll
It's
give
maybe
you
a bit
that.
heavy duty, to be
Maybe.
fair, but
Hmm.
like I have like hooks that are like meant to like lift steel that are less heavy duty than this thing. But
Yeah, but you live on a farm,
yeah, that's my point. I
not
have like
in a
smaller
sorority house.
hooks than this. Yeah. So it's a pretty heavy duty hook, but yeah, it's other than that, I think there's a reason for a hook to be there.
Hmm.
Who knows? Maybe someone just gave them a spare hook. It's possible. It happens. But anyway, yeah. So Mrs. Mack is dead, but the taxi driver goes up to the door, knocks around for her because he's been waiting, and he ends up leaving. This is something they don't find out about until like almost shockingly. It's weird that they don't bring this up again later. Like I think I guess her sister. She was going to her sister's, and I guess maybe she lives far enough away that it would take some time. I don't know that she's not flying somewhere, to be fair. Like it could be that she's not expected for a little over a day. The movie ends. Does it end sometime during the night of? Because I think this takes place over like a 48-hour period. Yeah, I think this maybe ends sometime at like early in the morning. So yeah, this is and yeah, this is happening like in the AMs. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's okay. So yeah, that's the thing. Meanwhile, we hear another Jess gets another crank call and calls the police, but is a bit dismissed as she leaves a message just as some of the other girls and Mr. H and Chris are at the police station, and they take down and he says he's going. The cop says he's gonna send someone to go look at it, but it's gonna take a while. Mr. H also recognizes the mess the Mr. H ends up overhearing this phone call and puts it together with one of the higher up detectives who he managed to snag, who gives the cop they were talking to, Sergeant what's his name, Sergeant Nash, a bit of shit because they've apparently these girls have been receiving like these really disturbing phone calls for quite a while, and then one of them goes missing. It's pretty damning evidence, but he's managing to make the connection. Also, there's a 13-year-old girl who's gone missing, so there's maybe a serial killer in the area. So at this point, the cops start taking this sort of seriously. So yeah, the cop make the Lieutenant Fuller, played by John Saxton, decides to like make this a big point of contention. So yeah, they're gonna go back to the house, sorority house, and get some stuff set up. We get a little bit more of Jess and Peter having the argument. They're having the argument in the sorority house, but Jess ends up shooing him away just before the cops show up because they haven't resolved this argument. Essentially, Peter wanted to drop his ditch, he was going to drop out of school and like wanted to marry Jess and keep the baby instead of aborting it. But Jess doesn't want to, so this argument continues, and he leaves as the cops show up. What they end up doing is they end up bugging the sorority's phones so that they can get the read on these obscene phone calls. They also set a cop outside the sorority to do a stakeout and keep an eye on the place, and he is immediately dead. I don't see it on screen, but I just knew this man was dead as soon as I saw him. That guy, we're going to see this guy later in the movie, and he is going to have been dead for hours. Just, yeah. Sad story of this random nameless cop who was supposed to protect these
Yeah, but
ladies.
arguably that means that Bill at some point in time had to leave the house.
I mean, barely. I mean, he's just outside. Yeah.
But it all depends on how he went, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess arguably he just climbed the lattice in the first part, but like still. Also, it's never explained. This isn't actually it's not set anywhere.
Oh, the movie? Yeah, they don't state that
Yeah.
it's set in Canada, but I think it's just implied, kind of, I guess. And the film's shot in Toronto, but yeah, I think it's left sort of ambiguous, I guess. But I mean, ambiguous in this sense doesn't mean much. It just means they're allowing the setting to be a little bit more evergreen. I don't know that there's Canadian flags sitting anywhere, but yeah. Yeah, because I don't think there would be Mounties or anything. These are city police. But anyway, yeah, it was just funny to me because I just knew that guy was dead as soon as I saw him. Just like, yeah, he's dead. Yeah, so we also get a red herring shot of Peter leering at potential red herring shot actually of Peter leering at the house from across the street, kind of angrily. And we also get another thing adding to this theory when we see Billy put a doll into Claire's arms, implying that he's like symbolizing the baby that Peter is going that like Peter and Claire, Peter and Jess's potential baby, I guess is the symbolism. There's implication here that Billy is listening in to every conversation that's going in the house, and that explains how he'll find out about this oncoming baby issue. And he quotes Peter verbatim in one of the later scene phone calls. He's maybe even listening into some of the phone calls themselves. Barbara and the killer ends up crawling down sometime later in the day while some of the people go out to look for the dead 13-year-old girl. Yeah, at some point they do a thing where some of the girls are out helping to look around for this 13-year-old girl and maybe find Claire. Little girl, the 13-year-old girl had gone missing somewhere in this park. They eventually find her and we don't see the body. I think that's what I was referring to earlier when I said we don't see all the bodies. I don't
Mm-hmm.
no again, I don't know if a 80s slasher movie would show you a dead child body. I think that would maybe go a little too far. Barbara is sleeping in her room. She's kind of had some she's kind of like hungover and whatnot. She's sleeping and we hear a scream that what's her name? Uh Jess goes no, it's Jess that goes up to check on the screaming because Jess goes and screams. It turns out that she had woken up from an asthma attack while Billy was in the room, and she just thought Billy was part of a dream, so that freaked her out. So yeah, Jess helps her with her inhaler briefly, and then they go to leave. So yeah, she leaves, and then Billy ends up killing Barb with a glass unicorn, which she has lying around.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The kills in
Well,
this aren't.
carolers play downstairs.
Oh yeah, well, carolers are downstairs distracting Jess. One of the other girls is upstairs, like sleeping during this, but only doesn't hear everything. Although I think that would freak me out a bit more, knowing that like one of my friends is missing, and I hear like a scream in the house. I think that would draw my attention pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Although this movie isn't bad for stuff like that, where like where the characters are being stupid. I think the characters in this are reasonably intelligent. I think there's maybe like a few moments, but I don't think anything is like super egregious for like stupidity. I don't know. Did you find anything really dumb they did?
Uh, like I don't know. They sit there and listen to this guy fucking prank call him for like I don't know 2 to 3 minutes every single time instead of just hanging up the fucking phone. I had to take one listen into that fucking noise that they're making and then just straight up hang up. That's it's kind of weird, but like I mean, I don't I don't know enough about Billy as a character to really say that that wouldn't set him off as somebody who's clearly already killed. Um, that's one thing about the movie is you really don't.
Like that's also a bit of a narrative contrivance than anything. I think they're just like in real life you'd hang up, but I think they want like the audience to hear more of the phone call,
Sure.
so it's less stupid. It's more just like a narrative contrivance. Anyway, you were saying?
What I was gonna say is like you don't get enough uh, of on-screen time from Billy's perspective and or see enough shots of Billy to really learn like what's his motivation, like is he just like run of the mill like socio he doesn't seem to be showing like sociopathic tendencies necessarily. He just seems to be like fucking weird as shit. I don't know how
Yeah.
to best describe that, but like clearly he's got something wrong with him, but like you don't see enough of him to learn, or you don't know enough about his backstory to really learn. Like maybe besides the fact that he's fucking nuts, like that's about all you got to go on. Like he doesn't have any motivation outside of
I think this movie is trying to be a bit of a mystery though,
yeah.
so yeah, so I think that's maybe a part of it. Which I don't know. In that sense, it's not really a flaw.
Hmm.
Like I said, this is a pretty good movie, all things considered, compared to a genre which can be sometimes accused of being pretty like lowbrow. I think this does a pretty good job most of the time. Yeah, so she's dead. It's a few. They've gotten a few phone calls. This is actually an interesting thing. They have to when they get one of the phone calls, they have to trace the call essentially, and how they apparently do that. And I didn't realize this because they always say this in like TV shows where like, listen, you got to keep them on for a couple minutes in order to trace the call. And I didn't realize in the 70s the reason they were saying that is because the guy at the phone station literally needed to like go from one link of the phone station to the other and like wiggle through this maze of phone lines in order to figure out where the call's physically coming from, which is really interesting. I didn't realize
Hmm.
that was the case. And maybe they've simplified this technology in the future, where they've like made this computerized, I'm pretty sure. But it's interesting to see how this like was sorted out.
Sure, but but like nowadays it's kind of the same thing because you have to triangulate the position that people are phoning off of cell phones because it pings off cell phone towers, right?
Yeah, they're trying to find the physical location and space where the person is, whereas in the old days they were trying to like track a physical phone line, which
Hmm.
is interesting. It's like an interesting. We don't like it's something that's shown on screen here, which isn't normally shown on screen in other movies. Like they hired an actor and presumably like rented out some space in a phone studio, which is a good bit of courtesy, and I think it works really good for the film. It does great wonders for tension. Really
It does wonder for tension, but like as we said earlier, it's not thematically or physically possible. So
true. Yeah. So again, it's a horror. It's horror movie. Those kind of like steep themselves in urban legends. So that's I think it's fair. If this is the only narrative
yeah,
contrivance we have in the movie, I think this does pretty good. I also kind of want to talk briefly about how I didn't get to I didn't think to talk about this earlier, but I should have of the cop kind of dismissing the people in the earlier bit of the movie because that's
sure.
like that is like some nightmarish part of all these like if you watch like these true crime missing persons things on TV, that's always the thing they say is like the police wouldn't look because it's not really a missing persons case after until after a certain amount of time, but also the first 48 hours are the best amount of time to like recover a missing person. So it's really it's pretty frustrating, and we know this. We know this definitely to some extent happens in real life, so it like blends into this film pretty well, where like it lends credibility to the threat, I think, and it's pretty disturbing when you think about it. When you realize like, oh, this guy, this like fucking loser cop's actions are like the real. This sort of thing happens in real life, and this is how people actually die sometimes. And it's like a good contrivance to the film. This film is lauded as something of a feminist film, because it does also like obviously it does have some pretty reasonably nuanced female characters, so there's that. Something you wouldn't again, in 10 years you can't make this movie this way and like have it be good like this, because the producers will get in the way and like make it be like all topless scenes or something, and just hire any
Mm-hmm.
random actress with like a larger cup size, which isn't a drought against like a shot against the actress. It's a shot against like people not choosing good actresses because they think that they can like ignore quality of actor in exchange for stuff. It's a flaw in like the male casting directors more than anything. But yeah, I think there's certainly some credence to that. I think it does talk a good bit about women's issues. It doesn't really I think obviously if you're, I guess, if you're pro life, you're gonna like really look down on Jess, but that's the film itself does not look down on Jess for her decision, for her desire to get an abortion. So that's it's certainly letting it stand on its own merits, if nothing else. I don't think it's this film is like doing anything to condemn her, at very least. Yeah, this is very decent. This is decently removed from these Reagan era slasher films where the killer is like punishing people for having sex or doing drugs, which is, I guess, Freddy the 13th's mo. But yeah, so far removed from that. So we get a couple phone calls with everyone. We get one phone call from Billy, which is not tracked because they don't keep it on long enough. We get another phone call from Peter, calling Jess, who's just like in tears, crying because he doesn't want. He's upset about getting them dumping, hurt him getting dumped. It is notably different from the crank calls, but it's also like somewhat incoherent. So I guess the cops maybe have you can see this idea forming in the police lieutenant's head, that the prank phone calls are like coming in like stages, and like the theory being that the first phone call was him being brash, but the second phone call is him like breaking down, and it's part of the same emotional arc, which doesn't end up being the case. Spoilers, but you can see the wheels turning, and it's they make a somewhat compelling case for Peter being the killer, and certainly it's no more improbable than like given until later in the movie, it's no more improbable than the phone call coming from inside the house, which isn't something they can actually do. Like if the phone call can't come from inside the house, why can't like Peter come up with some fancy phone technology to like do a phone call from a different place, or like it's pointed out later that Peter was there during one of the crank calls, so it couldn't be. So they don't think it can be him. Um, but that could we could also just say, oh yeah, he's sending like a pre-recorded phone call. Although the technology is not here for that in the 70s, I don't think. Like that would imply that Peter's some sort of expert with phone lines for some reason, which isn't terribly credible. But again, we don't necessarily know. It's weird. We don't know what's going on in the background necessarily, and really we never do. But yeah. So the police lieutenant decides that he wants to look into Peter, if nothing else, just in case, because he is kind of uh, like in a bad state, if nothing else. So yeah, they go after him. They don't end up finding him. We do also see some guys pop into the window with guns briefly after the phone calls. They're just some vigilantes out searching for the serial killer who killed the 13-year-old girl, which I don't know if this is allowed. Probably, definitely not in Canada. I don't think you're allowed to. Then again, I don't know what the gun laws in Canada were in the 1970s. But it's a little weird seeing these guys just wandering around looking for guns. Although the girls kind of laugh it off, which is maybe a bit unrealistic because these guys
I
are
mean,
lunatics.
arguably, we have. Do we not have open carry laws?
No, not really.
No,
Not in cities. I don't think.
I didn't think so. Not
No,
in
not in
cities.
Canada. I don't. Yeah, and I don't think you can deputize people in Canada, which you can in the states. Some places, which presumably might be what's happening. Although these cops seem, I would hope, a hair too professional to be deputizing people, because deputizing people is usually bad. I know what people like. You might scoff at that, but some people in the audience might scoff at that. But like that has led to like a lot of like police lynchings in the past, like deputizing randos to go fight people. It's pretty sketchy stuff when you really get down to it. Phil, spelled Phyl, as in Phyllis. She goes to check on Barbara, which leads to her getting killed when Billy closes the door on her. So yeah, she's also dead. At this point, they get another phone call, which they are able to trace. Although this is happening while the lieutenant's outside of the building, so he doesn't hear the phone call. But they do manage to trace it, so he calls back. The lieutenant, who is looking for Peter at this point, and they point out the phone call is coming from inside the house. So the lieutenant calls Sergeant Nass to call, and tells her to call the sorority and just tell her. And Nash says for calls the sorority. Jess picks up and tells Jess to just leave the building right now. Don't ask any questions. Just leave, which is probably just a bad way to go about that. But yeah, she goes to leave. She gets told to do this, but she ends up going back to check on her roommates because she hasn't heard from them, and she tries to leave. She shouts for them, and they don't come, which is at this point pretty disturbing, knowing that the killer has been inside the sorority. We get the lieutenant calling the stakeout cop, who has absolutely been dead for hours. Just his throat is slit and is not answering his walkie-talkie. Is that what they're called? Radio, I think. Two-way radio when it's in the police car like that. Yeah, so needing to go check on her friend, she grabs a poker from the fireplace to go be the probably one of the first examples of the final girl. Is there a final girl in Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I think there is.
I have also never seen Texas Chainsaw
Yeah, no.
Massacre.
Yeah, so she goes to check on him. They go to she goes to Barb's door, which is locked, and she breaks it down to find Barb and Phil dead on the bed. And she gets chased around. Billy grabs her hair, but she manages to get away and locks herself in the basement as like Billy slams on the doors, but eventually leaves. We don't actually see much of Billy during this. We see his eye, but we don't see his full body. So it still implies that you can do the fake out with Peter. But Peter ends up showing up anyway, knocking on the window and goes to see her. Immediately after that, Billy has wandered off, and he thinks And Jess comes to the logical conclusion that Peter was Billy and is just wandering out and pretending to be normal because he's acting a little too friendly, to be fair. Although he's just had a fight with his girlfriend, so maybe he's just trying to be nice, which is, I guess, the scenario. So he wanders in. He ends up breaking the window to get in, which is probably not great. And he breaks his way into the basement to go check on her, check on Jess. And yeah, the next thing we hear is the cops arriving to one of Jess's screams, and they find Jess and Peter unconscious in the basement. And Peter is dragged to a hospital, presumably, and Jess is unconscious from God knows what. I guess she hit her head or something. Mr. Davidson is quite shocked because it's a pretty. They haven't found the bodies yet. It's a pretty foregone conclusion that Claire's dead because they found Barb and Phil, and they know the killer was inside the building. So they haven't done a thorough check of the building, which why aren't they? To be fair, they should probably be doing that immediately. So yeah, Mr. Davidson's shocked, goes into a bit of shock, and they take him to a hospital, leaving Jess there unconscious in the building with a cop watching the front door. They think they have the real killer because she knocked Peter across the head. But as we pan across the house, we hear some indication that Billy's still there and eventually going to kill Jess. There's a phone call inside the building that the cops doesn't answer as the credits roll. It's pretty sinister. But yeah, so yeah, the killer gets away. It's pretty freaky. This movie had made more money, there would have been 12 sequels to this where we got all of Billy's backstory, but thankfully we never did. Perhaps, thankfully.
No,
We
but
did get 2
instead we
remakes.
got
Yeah,
2 reboots.
yeah,
Like,
2 bad reboots. At least 1 bad reboot. I haven't.
it's
To be
like
fair, I haven't seen 2019, so I don't want to like blanketly declare it's bad without even seeing a frame of it.
uh
I'm just being fair.
I just yeah. I think there it has a lot to be said. Like, if I were to watch the 2019 version without any pre-connotation to what this movie was, maybe I might have thought it was good, or maybe the 2006 version, but because I've seen this version, it's kind of gonna taint how I look at the other 2 remakes at this point.
And you know what? It doesn't. Those reboots don't always bother me, but for this one, it feels like I scarcely actually get like this, but this one actually feels just like it's so good it feels wrong trying to do the same thing again. Like it's just
Mhm.
so well done, which I don't get like that often. Like I don't mind like the RoboCop reboot. I don't mind the what's another one. I don't mind most of the superhero reboots. But yeah, it's just this one feels pretty bad. And especially since it's a standalone movie and it's not like grabbing sequels or whatever. I don't know. Uh, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Is there anything else to say?
No, not really, not
Mm,
anything that we haven't already touched on. We've kind of been at this for almost 2 hours now for,
yeah, we're getting there. It's getting
I
kind of
think, an
late.
hour and a
Yeah,
half maybe. So, I mean, that's kind of generally how we normally go about things, but
yeah,
we had some technical issues and shit like that, so I'm not
yeah,
really
yeah,
uh, blaming
yeah.
it too much
Yeah, no, and
on
I think we got a lot of good stuff in
that.
there. We talked a lot about slasher movies. I think maybe not normal Christmas conversation,
Look,
admittedly, but that's not the worst thing.
it it was definitely a choice on your part for this movie, and I'm not saying it was a bad choice, but it's kind of definitely an out of out of the way Christmas movie.
Yeah. I do
So
like and also the Christmas setting is almost more of a way to like to make things difficult for the police, actually, because like I think Billy probably chose this time to do his killings on purpose because people are leaving and they won't necessarily be accounted for a couple hours. Obviously,
Hmm.
that didn't work out too
Well,
well with Claire,
I'm not gonna.
but no one knows about Mrs. Mack yet at the end of the movie. So
Yeah, I guess like they don't find the bodies of those two up until like maybe they search the attic.
they'll find them eventually.
It's like
Like
it's like
after, like they find them within 12 hours of the end of this movie. I guarantee you. But um,
mhm. Or they never do. Like
yeah,
John Wayne Gacy was hiding bodies underneath his house, and they'd investigated him like twice, and they never found anything up until they learned
okay,
um
true,
like
but
his house started
yeah,
to smell,
yeah. Though I
right?
think
So
they're gonna be looking for these guys pretty like they're gonna be looking for people pretty thoroughly around here pretty soon. Um, I think we could have easily ended this movie with them searching the house pretty thoroughly.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that definitely makes a difference. Where John Wayne Gacy was at least hiding behind some semblance of anonymity, like.
This is also like not a public residence, but like a place that the cops are currently wandering in and out of. They're gonna notice something eventually. Um, and eventually, like they're gonna call, like Mrs. Mack is gonna get called in missing. They're gonna be like tearing this place apart to find a body eventually.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
Okay, so I think the better question is I don't remember the scene where they murder Miss Mac for all of its entirety. How did she get up into the attic?
Oh, she was just crawling up there because she heard Claude scurrying about in the
But
attic.
okay, so how do you get up into the attic?
Oh, there was a
Was there
ladder.
like a descending staircase?
No, there's a ladder.
Okay, so she had to go get a ladder to
No, there's a
climb up to
ladder
the
like built into
staircase.
the wall.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yes, it's a wall. It's a ladder built into the wall.
Okay, that's a little bit more confusing, or less confusing, because at least you could pull the ladder up, and like nobody would maybe think of looking up in the attic.
Yeah, the attic's kind of like in like the end at like the end of a
Yeah, but
hallway.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, the cat found two of the bodies,
true. Yeah, I wonder
right?
how the cat got up there.
Or one
Yeah,
of the bodies. Did the cat go up to the attic, or did Billy just leave the body in her room?
like okay, so Billy could have left was probably leaving the could have been leaving the trap door open to the attic. So that may have been part of that's still account that's still difficult for the cat to get up there, but I don't know. Although it's a cat, they get to weird places
So,
sometimes.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and try and poke holes in absolutely every part of this story because I mean it was still somewhat decent, but uh, it's just missing a few things, and like maybe a few things that like a remake would do better on it. But once again,
Maybe, but
I don't think I would touch
I don't
it
know. I think you might
as a
have like a
director or.
yeah. I think you might have a lesser opinion of this movie if you think really highly of cops because the cops don't necessarily do the best job in this. They don't the lieutenant doesn't do a bad job necessarily, but he's just not doing like the ace cop thing.
Mhm.
Although this movie only takes place over the course of like 40 hours, so it's pretty quickly it doesn't it takes pretty quick.
Like I think this calls into the like maybe back in the day this was a big thing where 48 hours nobody's missing, we can't call in a missing person case. Maybe that makes more sense because back in the day there used to be like traveling time where somebody couldn't get to a phone or somebody couldn't write a letter to
Yeah,
send back to some place where else. So I don't know exactly how people communicated back then, but like everybody has access to cell phones right now, everybody has access to computers, if somebody is going missing, they're off the grid. Like, I think that would increase the
There's a lot
urgency.
more off the grid time in the 70s. I don't know.
Mhm. I think
Like
that
it.
should increase the
Yeah.
urgencies before people start saying, you know, they're missing. I don't even know if it's 48 hours. Is it 48 or 72?
I well, okay, so I don't know about the police policy, but like sometimes they don't let you call in a missing person case unless the person's been gone for so long. But I don't know, but that's a like obviously a policy decision, less a like hard rule for like every police department. The 48-hour statistic is another thing because most people like if a missing person is gone for more than 48 hours, they're like there's a large percentage of the time they're dead is also a thing,
Mhm.
which is like one of those things is something we can do something about, one doesn't.
72 hours is what is classified as a missing person. Uh the last person known to see the missing person last has been no earlier than 72 hours. Um Presumption of death rule is 7 years, so if somebody hasn't been seen for 7 years, they're presumed dead.
But yeah, yeah, I think it's also yeah, it's different seeing some of these 70s murders, and this is very timely. I don't know, you can't do this as easily in the modern age because some of the you'd probably just try texting Claire and like either like I suppose you could just turn off her cell phone, but they can maybe find it. Then again, I don't know. There are ways you could do it, but it'd be really suspicious if like you were entirely incapable of like finding someone. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but yeah, no,
Mhm.
I think this is pretty good. What do you give the movie, Cody?
I'm gonna give the movie between, like, a 7 and an 8 out of 10. Um,
Hmm.
really didn't check any boxes for me for a Christmas movie besides the fact that there's occasionally some Christmas stuff going on. Um I think that's generally, if we're doing Christmas episodes, how you have to base some of the, groupings on. I took points off for stuff such as, inconsistencies in the storytelling or the storyline or, um, whatchamacallit. I gave it generally high and positive review because I don't think, um it's one of those cult movies that I don't think should have been touched, but it was. Like,
Yeah, it's they
um
probably shouldn't have made two more of these like remakes. They shouldn't have tried this two more times.
my point being is that, like, the story itself is, like, you see it a lot, in, like, killer movies, but I mean, it leaves the endings so open that it's like I wouldn't try and do, like, a sequel because, like, diminishing returns at that point in time, like, you just try and encapsulate the same thing every the other 3rd movie or what, like, it just wouldn't work out very well. Um
I yeah, I don't see this guy getting too much farther. I don't see Billy getting too much farther, really. Although I don't know.
mhm.
I think that like a sequel would be like very different. There's someone who made a fan made sequel of this, starring like that's about like Jess's grandchild, which is like, wait, why? No one said she died. She probably died here. Like I don't see why the implication where her grandchild would be around. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Um
Um,
Also, like, I don't really care much for, Bob Clark. Like, he had this, and that's, like, I looked through his filmography, and it's nothing great. Like, I don't know what Porky's is, but he did Porky's 1, Porky's 2. I guess he
Porky's is
did A
like a
Christmas
huge
Story,
movie. He
which is
did
kind of really big.
Porky's.
Yeah, he was
Hold
a
on,
writer, director, and producer on both Porky's and Porky's 2.
Porky's are like Porky's is like huge movies.
So,
Those are
what
like
do
huge.
you classify as a huge movie?
Well, those are like really famous comedies.
Oh, okay. So it made 5 million and it made like $160 million at the box office. So apparently it is
Yeah.
very
Oh yeah, they're
important.
huge.
Um,
And I guess Christmas
but he went.
Story, which is it's around. People say it. I don't know. I've never seen it.
How have you never watched A Christmas Story?
I don't know. I don't watch a
No.
lot of Christmas movies really.
That's the one where he's like, I want the rifle, and then he shoots his eye out with the rifle.
Ew, I don't want to see that. I want to see the movie less that you said he shoots his eye out. That's just makes it worse for me. Also directed Murder by Decree and Tribute.
Uh, yeah, but his directorial review was a 1960 movie called She-Man, which is about a
No, it's
soldier
a
who is forced to
1966 movie
become
called The
a.
Emperor's New Clothes. That's his second movie. Ugh, yeah, this She
Uh,
Man looks
yeah,
pretty fucking bad.
that's a short film though. I don't know why like
Oh
he
yeah,
would
yeah. You're right.
like
Yeah,
underneath it.
you
It
beat me.
says short film, and then underneath it says directorial debut. But the Emperor's New Clothes, yes, it says that he was also director and writer. So I don't know why they would have that inconsistency in a Wikipedia list. His last known movie was Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. Which got him nominated for a Golden Raspberry and a Stinkers Award for Worst Sense of Direction and Worst Director. Um,
He
but
did
his
also
his
do the first one, so that is his series at least.
mhm. But he also, as a director in 2004, made a movie called The Karate Dog. So there's that.
Fuck, this She Man is just like the most transphobic shit you've ever seen. Like this is terrible. This did not age well.
like
Like what? Like that didn't age well in the 1960s.
I'm just going off of what it says on the Wikipedia page. I've never actually
Oof.
looked into like
No, like I don't see it being any better if you watch the movie. Yeah, no, I refuse it. Yeah, granted, it's from long ago, so
what I'm saying is like he literally wrote this one and maybe a couple of others before this one. Children shouldn't play
well,
with
he didn't
dead
write
things.
this. To be fair, this is Roger Moore. Yeah,
Okay,
although
well he
Roy
still
Moore wrote
directed
this, he
it,
didn't.
which
Yeah.
arguably like some of the director choices are pretty good from what I've seen. Um, the scenes and such. But what I'm saying is he made this and then he just coasted up until he made like Porky's and then A Christmas Story, and then he just coasted for the rest of it. Like, I mean, he's probably old as fuck now, and like
I think he's dead.
maybe even dead. He died in 2007. Wow, that's dark. Um,
Yeah, no, I think this is. I think a good portion of this is like we can dictate to the script writer because he clearly operates very differently on his own. But yeah, I think I'm giving it a nine or a. I'm giving it a really high nine,
mhm.
maybe a 10 on another day, but I'm just not saying the word out loud right now. But I'm giving it a pretty high nine. I don't as it is. Like I can't there's maybe a couple things, but I think it's all like very forgivable. And yeah, it's just great movie.
Like, if you would have said prior to this, "Hey, I want you to watch this movie about a guy who murders people in the attics in and around Christmas time," I probably wouldn't have give this movie a whole lot of credence. But I think after
Oh yeah,
like
no.
reading up on the history, the fact that it's a Canadian film and that it also like pioneered its own craft and has been has received retroactive recognition as one of the best horror films ever made. I mean, like that's something to be said. Like you brought up Black Christmas, never heard of it prior to this episode. And maybe some of the preamble you gave me beforehand.
Oh, this is a weird. I remember this. I was actually looking like some contemporary reviews, and the one's just like, okay, this isn't contemporary, but it's IndieWire's top 100 best horror movies of all time. It says the plot sounds formulaic. It's like, how so? Like, is this formulaic at all? What's the? I don't know. This seems like a pretty original plot. There's also just like a
But dude, that's what I'm saying though. That like it doesn't. People are saying things like formulaic. Like I just recently took um, a gothic horror university class. Guys murdering women has been around for probably the whole existence of men and women. Like there's nothing new about it. I don't know what you mean by formulaic. Like
I wouldn't say the plot's formulaic. I think it's like works off a very different thing. I also see like some reviews of like them sending like, I swear they send some little old ladies to review these horror movies back in the day, and then like they're all weirded out by it. I think they did it for more like these would be comedy bits in like the modern day. That's weird. Anyway, I think we should wrap up. It's getting late.
mhm.
Yeah, check us out on YouTube and Facebook at Kyle and Cody's Called CinemaCast. All of season 1 is officially out now. I missed a couple episodes the first time. Don't know how, but I managed it somehow. Season 2 is I'm gonna try to get a chunk of it out over Christmas here. But yeah, in June, I mean in January, I don't know what all we're doing, but we're doing the second Goon movie first, so that'll be our first episode in January. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Was
That
that
movie,
Canadian? I'm pretty sure that was Canadian.
yeah, I think it's a joint effort anyway. Yeah, see you guys in Happy New Year 2022. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Bye, everybody.